welcome back to Chapter 1. Today we will be covering 1.2, which is meristematic tissues and growth. Still about plants, still about growth. This time we will focus on meristematic. So we did permanent tissue in 1.1, right? So this time we will focus on the actively dividing cells through mitosis, which we have mentioned before. Okay, so meristematic tissues, there are two different types, which is the apical meristem and the lateral meristem. Apical meristem tissues are located at the tips of plant shoots and roots. As you can see here, if you've heard of the word apex, which is APEX, if I remember correctly, that means the end, the tip, the top of something, right? Same case, apical, the top, the end. For roots, both roots and shoots have apical meristem tissues, whereas the lateral meristem tissue is consists of vascular cambium and the cork cambium. So the vascular is where you have your vascular tissues, the one that we've mentioned before, right? So that's the vascular cambium and the cork cambium. So lateral basically just means horizontal. Yeah, horizontal. Okay, so all organisms, of course, starts from a small young stage, right? In humans, it's called the zygote stage to an adult. Okay, that change is called growth and development. And in Form 4, we've learned that in humans and animals. And of course, with plants, growth and development occurs as well. So the definition of growth always starts with irreversible change. Irreversible change. Okay. So if it is reversible, it's probably not growth. It's just changes. Yeah. Development. Sometimes you go back, so that's not really growth. So growth is irreversible change in the size of cells. In this case is plants, right? And the size of cells or plants due to both cell division and elongation. So you have your cell divide into many different cells, different type of cells, and then you also have cell elongation where the size of the cells increase. Okay, and next we go to the zones of cell growth. So we have three different types of zones, right? And this occurs in both the shoots and the roots at the apical meristem tissue. Okay, we have your zone of cell division, zone of cell elongation, zone of cell differentiation, and this growth occurs in and this zones of growth is actually the primary growth. So primary growth occurs in apical meristem. Okay, primary growth, apical meristem. It doesn't have to specifically be shoots, like it can occur in roots as well. Okay, so you have your three different section in shoot here, and then you have your root here. Okay, so in a way, just remember where the division occurs, so that really helps with like your visualization of the three different types of zones of cell growth. Okay, so for the first zone, the zone of cell division, this takes place in the apical. Of course, they're all apical, right? And then the increase of the number of cells causes the elongation of the plant stem. So we first go with increase of the number of cells. That's our first main point in zone of cell division. Okay, cells divide, which directly causes increase in number. So when new cells are forming, the cells from previously are pushed to the zone of elongation. So after the cell divide, it goes to the zone of elongation. Okay, in elongation, the size of the cells increase, and this happens through water diffusion by osmosis and absorption of nutrients into the cells and stored in vacuoles. So remember, okay, water diffusion, of course, osmosis, and absorption of nutrients into the cell. And the organelle that stores of all of this is vacuoles. And then while all of this is happening, the small vacuoles actually fuse to form a large vacuole. This is what is known as vacuolation. So for vacuolation, this is the main agenda, I guess, for cell elongation. Okay, the diffused water exerts pressure against the cell walls, which pushes, elongates, and widens the cells, which is you have small, and then you have your enlarged vacuoles increase in size, and then because of the water pressure, you get a longer cell, water pressure, vacuolation. And lastly, we have the zone of cell differentiation. So in this zone, it consists of differentiating cells that, of course, differentiate once they have reached their maximum size. So all types of plant cells will have a maximum size, and once they reach it, they will go into the differentiation zone. So they differentiate to form permanent tissues, such as the epidermis, the cortex, the xylem, and the phloem. And then, of course, due to the need of functions of each of this permanent tissue, right? The shape changes and the structure changes, which in the end becomes specialized cells with specific functions. So for example, epidermal cells in leaves differentiate and form guard cells that control the opening of stoma, and they also form root hair cells when they are in the in the roots. Okay, differentiated cells and roots form root hair cells. So that is the occurrence in the zone of cell differentiation. So the 3 different zones, just need to remember, they mostly occur in the apical meristem, and then slowly going down to the main part of the plant. Okay. Right, this is the activity that you probably have done in class. The different types of growth. So we have a primary growth and we have secondary growth. So with primary growth, we just covered it with the 3 different zones, right? It occurs after germination. Okay, this is the type of growth that occurs right after germination and takes place in all plants to elongate their stems and roots. So it's mostly about elongation, becoming taller, becoming longer. Okay, primary growth takes place in the apical meristems of shoot tips and root tips. This is where the meristem cells in the zone of cell division are actively dividing, which we have covered as the first zone of cell growth. Okay. At the shoot tips, we actually have primordia. So primordia is where new leaves or new shoots will grow, and this is at the tips of the shoots. So this enables the plants to increase in height. And then at the root tips, the root cap will become exhausted when they penetrate the soil, so it causes the cells of the root cap to be replaced by meristem cells. So you have exhausted root cap, but you still need the root cap to make sure that the roots are protected from any mechanical damage because of penetrating through the soil to grow basically, right? So it is replaced by meristem cell, which is again resetting the cycle to make sure that it grows into root cap. So yeah, it's a continuous life, continuous growth at that area. So then we have secondary growth. So secondary growth occurs mainly in eudicots, yeah, and a small number of monocots to increase the circumference or diameter of plant stem and root. So this is increasing the width of the plant. So for non-woody plants such as herbaceous plants, secondary growth does not happen. However, if you see like monocots, right? Some monocots like palm trees actually a monocot, and then you can still see like the stem just grows thicker over time. That is not because of secondary growth. That is caused by like just thickening due to like parts of the leaf not leaving the main plant. So like when palm trees shed the leaves, some parts of the leaves are still attached to the main stem. That's why over time it gets thicker, right? That's that's how monocots, certain monocots increase in circumference. So they're not really secondary growth. Okay. So as mentioned before, lateral meristems consist of vascular cambium and cork cambium. And the vascular cambium is located between the phloem and xylem tissues in vascular bundles, and the cork cambium is located under the epidermal layer. Okay, so it gets a little bit more specific and complicated on this page. So in the example, it has a 3-year growth of a plant, of a certain specific plant. Okay, secondary growth will start when the vascular cambium, so we have a cambium here, divides actively through mitosis. So the cells are still actively dividing because they are growing.
Here's what I found.
Oops, sorry. Because they are growing, right? So mitosis is the choice for cell division, because it is plants, right? It's not an animal. Then after that, the cells in the cambium ring divide inwards to form new xylem. So it goes inwards actually to form the new xylem, because as we sorry, not yet. So divide inwards to form new xylem, whereas going outwards just forms new phloem. So the new xylem tissue becomes secondary xylem, and the new phloem tissue becomes secondary phloem. So any of the new tissues becomes the secondary vascular tissue. Okay? So the cells in the cambium ring that divides just push the xylems and the phloems into secondary xylems and phloems. Excuse me. And then in the next step, primary xylem, which is the old tissue, okay? Primary xylem is pushed towards the pith, middle, whereas primary phloem is pushed towards the epidermis, outside. So primary xylem and primary phloem move in the opposite direction of the lateral meristem. Okay, opposite direction. So as a result, the primary xylem tissue are compressed to form a stronger wood layer. The logic behind it being strong is because it is dead cells, and dead cells are still have like lignin, right? So it is very strong. It's not weak. Okay. The walls, here we go, yeah. Thickened with lignin. And then the thickening of the lignin provides mechanical support to plants, which is, of course, we want the plants to support itself, okay? And lastly, when the secondary xylem layer is compressed, there is an addition to the circumference of the stem, which causes the epidermis of the stem to stretch and crack. This is why you see like trees, right? If you look at them, the outer layer of the stem of the tree is cracked. So that's the epidermis. Okay. And the cork cambium still actively divides to form cork cells on the outer side and cortex on the inner side. So cork outside, cortex inside. Okay. Cortex ini, and then cork sini. Okay. And then the cork layer then protects the stem from insects and pathogen attack when the epidermis is cracked. So even though like the epidermis of the plant has cracked, the plant itself still has a mechanism to protect itself from damage. Yeah. So that's basically secondary growth, where you have a primary xylem, which are the old tissues being pushed in, or primary phloem being pushed out, and then the secondary xylem and secondary phloem takes over for the next secondary growth cycle to continue, right? And then we have the secondary growth in roots. So the roots of plants also undergo secondary growth to make sure that the size of the root, circumference of the root increase. It's basically the same as the stem. Okay, so first, vascular cambium actively divide, form complete ring, and then cells in the cambium ring divide inwards to form secondary xylem, outwards to form secondary phloem, and then etc. The root becomes thicker. And lastly, the cork cambium located under the epidermis divides actively to form cork cells, and the cork cells provide protection to the root tissue. Now, with roots, the epidermis does not crack, because with roots the epidermis is less hard, smooth, softer. So the increase in size is also not as large as what is happening in the stem, so it can still accommodate. Now, it doesn't crack easily, but of course, as protection layer, cork cells are still evolved for the root in terms of secondary growth. Okay, and now we go to formation of secondary xylem in spring and summer. This is a bioexploration. If you've ever heard, if you want to know the age of a tree, just count the number of rings. So this is a bit of a explanation to why you have different colored rings. Okay, so this is especially applicable to plants living in temperate climate, right? They are annual growth rings. And this is because secondary growth happens at different rates according to the season. In spring, there's enough water, there's enough sunlight, so the xylem form are bigger, the wall is thinner. So the xylem tissues form are brighter in color. However, in the summer, it is a bit hotter, right? The sunlight is too strong. So the formation of secondary xylem is smaller with thicker walls, because it's just very the plants are just going through so much. Okay, so they aren't able to form bigger secondary xylem, so they are darker in color. I guess you can say that they're tanning. They have a summer bod. Okay, not to put the stereotypes in, but you know, help you to remember what is happening better. Okay, spring and summer, that's where the difference in terms of different colored rings in the growth rings for trees in temperate climate. Okay, now we actually do have secondary growth in certain monocots. Okay, it's just simply just the growth of the main chunk, stem. Yes, so we have your Dracana. You have your aloe vera and you have your agave. And agave, you'd be surprised at how tall this plant can grow. But anyway, I'm digressing. So let's go to the necessity of primary growth and secondary growth. Okay, so of course the primary growth is basically to elongate, to make it taller so they can reach the sunlight, right? So maximum elongation absorbs sunlight for photosynthesis. So primary phloem can transport the products of photosynthesis from leaves to other parts of the plants, right? We've checked that. It's a core memory now. You remember it. And then primary xylem can transport water and mineral salts from soil via roots and leaves. Another core memory. You can never forget this. Okay. Phloem, sugar products, xylem, water and mineral salts. And also xylem provides support to herbaceous or young plants. And then we have necessity of secondary growth. So this is a bit, it's not really as obvious because, you know, it is the increase of circumference, increase of girth of plants. It basically is to provide stability to plants by increasing stem and root diameter to suit the height of the plants. Because if we have a very, very, very tall plant, but it's still very thin, it can easily be snapped by strong wind. So we still need to match that height with a suitable circumference and width. So stability. And of course, mechanical support and to help to produce more xylem and phloem tissue. As the height increases, of course, there is a, the demand for transport of water, mineral salts, and sugars increase. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, you need to have more xylem and phloem. So secondary growth also helps with continuous replacement of old and damaged xylem and phloem tissues. In the end, it produces stronger and thicker bark to provide protection to the plants from excessive water loss, physical injuries, and pathogen infections. And of course, with secondary growth, the plant is able to live longer by increasing the chances of seed production and reproduction. Okay, this is another activity that you would have done in class, and we'll go to the differences, comparison, similarities, and differences with the different types of growth in the next video.